Why don't you pass the time by playing a little solitaire? The first time we hear this line in the 1962 version of The Manchurian Candidate, the speaker is not seen. It is a voice heard over the telephone, and despite the question mark that appears at the end of the sentence in the screenplay, the line is delivered as a command.
Why don't you pass the time by playing a little solitaire?
The second time, we see the speaker, a bartender who casually recounts a suggestion he made to a third party.
Why don't you pass the time by playing a little solitaire?
But Raymond hears it as a command, and proceeds to do the next thing he is instructed to do, namely take a taxi up to Central Park and jump in the lake. The third time we hear this line, the speaker is Raymond's mother, Mrs. Iceland, who delivers it as a command, despite an intonation that is more befitting of an idle suggestion.
Why don't you pass the time by playing a little solitaire?
Her subsequent command has catastrophic consequences, resulting in Raymond's assassination of Senator Thomas Jordan and the murder of his daughter Josie, Raymond's wife. The wording of the fourth repetition is slightly different, but still it is a command of sorts, this time spoken by Bennett Marco, who wants to deactivate the brainwashing.
How about passing the time by playing a little solitaire?
The question is rhetorical because Raymond has been conditioned to do as instructed, and in each case he responds by laying out the 7-card spread that is variously called Solitaire, Klondike, or Patience, as the eponymous source novel by Richard Condon explains. Despite the widescreen 1.75 to 1 aspect ratio in which the film was shot, one rarely sees the entire 7-card spread of a hand of Klondike Solitaire. In most of the close-up shots showing hands dealing cards, we only see a few of the piles. Shots like these, and to a lesser extent the sounds the cards make when dealt, nevertheless give the film a rhythm. For Jean Epstein, the close-up is the soul of the cinema. It can be brief because the value of the photogenic is measured in seconds. In his 1921 account of magnification, Epstein also wrote, "The close-up modifies the drama by the impact of proximity. The close-up limits and directs the attention. As an emotional indicator, it overwhelms me. I have neither the right nor the ability to be distracted." For Epstein, movement is essential for the photogenic quality of the close-up shot, and he insisted that the amplifying close-up demands underplaying. No living actor could possibly ever underplay quite as effectively as the Queen of Diamonds, who is occasionally seen in extreme close-up, more like a medium shot for her, staring implacably back at us like a handheld Mona Lisa. Playing cards originated during the 14th century, but the earliest decks varied considerably and did not have standard suit symbols or hierarchies. The number of suits in a deck could be 5 or more, and included types of flowers, animals, and armor, as well as swords and coins. Types of face cards also varied. Numbered cards might start with 1, aces not being yet standard, and a deck could include as many as 56 cards or more. The standard 52-card deck emerged in France during the 15th century. It featured 13 cards and 4 suits, 2 of which were red, diamonds and hearts, and 2 of which were black, clubs and spades. The exact origins of each of the 4 suits has been the object of considerable historical research and even greater speculation. Some historians have suggested that suits in a deck were meant to represent the 4 classes of medieval society. Cups and chalices, modern hearts, might have stood for the clergy. Swords, spades, for the nobility or the military. Coins, diamonds, for the merchants, and batons, clubs, for peasants. More modern, but nevertheless not unrelated, associations have clustered around each of the suits. Films showing people playing cards are nearly as old as cinema itself, with the Lumiere brothers' Card Party coming shortly after the 1895 debut of their cinematograph, followed by Georges Méliès's version, Playing Cards, made in May of 1896. By the 20th century, the United States Playing Card Company had become the largest manufacturer of playing cards. One of the most popular types of cards it produced were the rider-back variety, first printed in 1885. This style capitalized on the 1880s craze for bicycling. These cards are seen in a number of different scenes of the Manchurian Candidate. Rider-backs have been printed in a number of different colors. Because the film is black and white, it is impossible to know what color the cards used on set might have been, but the main perceptual disjunction occurs when the other sides of the cards are shown. Although the Manchurian Candidate is a black and white film, we know the hearts and diamonds cards to be printed in red. Director John Frankenheimer himself thought the Manchurian Candidate would have been a much better movie in color, adding, "What one could have done with the Queen of Diamonds is mind-boggling." Nearly 60 years before the 1962 release of the Manchurian Candidate, Méliès faced a similar dilemma in making the living playing cards, which surprisingly was never offered for sale in a hand-colored version. Méliès' film literalizes the identification between face cards and individual human beings. Indeed, the oversized Queen of Hearts and King of Clubs are labeled Judith and Alexander. Named court cards date back to the historical beginnings of the present-day playing card deck. Until the 19th century, illustrations of full-length figures predominated on court cards. True face cards showing the countenances of jacks, kings, and queens, many with double heads like the Queens of Diamonds we see in close-up and extreme close-up shots in the Manchurian Candidate, appeared only in later decks. There's another type of playing cards that are seen in 3 scenes of the Manchurian Candidate. When Raymond receives the phone call instructing him to pass the time by playing a little solitaire, the cards are not rider backs, but instead have a pattern showing a circle within a rectangle. This is a bridge deck, maker unknown. Bridge decks are a 1/4 of an inch narrower than poker decks. This one appears to have the same back design as the specially prepared deck made up entirely of Queens of Diamonds, which Marco shows to Rosie in her apartment.
This is what is known, my dear girl, as a forced deck. This deck of cards is often employed by a professional magician to simplify his problem of guessing the card picked by the little old lady in the 3rd row.
And later uses to deprogram Raymond. The narrow width of a bridge deck makes it easier for players to fan a full hand of 13 cards. And indeed, Marco fans the cards in both of the latter 2 scenes. We never see the playing cards that were used as part of Raymond's conditioning in Manchuria, if physical cards were used at all. Klondike Solitaire is played with a deck of 52 cards. It reportedly got that name, and perhaps originated, during the Klondike gold rush of the late 1890s, when prospectors had a lot of time on their hands and wanted to pass it, as it were, despite having relatively minimal supplies and even more minimal opportunities for social interactions. As explained in the book New Hoyle Standard Games, the first card is turned face up and laid on the table. To the right of this card, but face down, are placed 6 more cards in a row. Immediately below the left-hand card of this row that is face down, another card is placed face up, and 5 to the right of it face down. Another card face up below, and 4 to the right face down, and so on until there are 7 cards face up and 28 in the layout. Any aces showing are picked out and placed by themselves above the layout for foundations. These aces are built on in sequence and suit up to kings. The moment any card in the layout is uncovered by playing away the bottom of the row, it is turned face up. Cards in the layout are built upon in descending sequence, king, queen, jack, down to 4, 3, 2, and must alternate in color, red on black, black on red. In the solitaire variation seen in the Manchurian Candidate, cards are dealt from the remaining stock of cards in the deck by 3s. If, as playing card historian Timothy B. Husband contends, the playing out of a hand of cards can be seen as a microcosmic reflection of the ever-changing world around us, a world in play, then the games of Klondike we see dealt in the Manchurian Candidate represent an especially rigid world that allows very little variation, one in which strict rules govern the placement of cards on the table. Most notably, it is a one-player game in which there is very little place for skill, only slightly more skill than the card game War played with 2 players. In Klondike Solitaire, the only thing that is at stake and might make one player's game differ from another using the same deck of cards is the ability to recognize that a card or group of cards can be moved from one file to the other within the layout, or moved to one of the foundations above the layout.
Obviously, the solitaire game serves as some kind of trigger mechanism. Black 7 on the red 8. Red 6 on the black 7.
Thanks a lot.
Nearly everything depends entirely on how the deck has been shuffled and the order of the cards in the deck when the game begins. There is much in the mise-en-scène of the film that reminds one of oversized playing cards. These aspects of setting include the large photographs of the faces of Stalin and Mao that decorate the Manchurian pavilion where the brainwashing demonstration takes place, the photographic transparencies of Soviet and Chinese officials and military projected for identification by Marco at Army Intelligence in Washington, and the images of Benjamin Arthur and John Iceland that are hoisted in Madison Square Garden, as well as the placards bearing their faces held by supporters at the political convention that follows. The credit sequence of the Manchurian Candidate aligns the Queen of Diamonds with Angela Lansbury's character. This momentary juxtaposition crystallizes in the conversation which Marco has with the psychiatrist, played by Joe Adams, uncredited.
I suggest we discard the various number systems and concentrate on the face cards because of their symbolic identification with human beings. Based on Raymond's psychiatric pattern, I think we can safely eliminate jacks and kings.
Full confirmation comes later when Marco recalls the demonstration of Raymond's brainwashing for Chinese and Soviet officials, adapted from a line of dialogue spoken by Yen Lo in Condon's novel.
The Queen of Diamonds is reminiscent in many ways of Raymond's dearly loved and hated mother, and is the second key to clear the mechanism for any other assignment. Yeah.
As every card player knows, face cards have a disproportionate importance in card games, and unlike most other cards in the deck, they have an anthropomorphic rather than a strictly numerical quality. The identification of flat playing cards with three-dimensional living things is further reinforced by the appearance of origami in the Manchurian Candidate. Yen Lo is characterized as a master of origami, the ancient Japanese art of paper folding. In the script and in the film, he is seen folding pieces of paper to approximate little creatures, one of which he sets on top of a Queen of Diamonds lying on the side table next to Raymond's sanitarium bed. The Queen of Diamonds is one of 2 red queens in a standard deck. Given the strong association between communism and the color red, the Red Queen takes on added significance once we realize that Raymond's mother is colluding with the Soviets. Every time Raymond turns up the fateful Red Queen, even though it appears on screen in black and white, duplicity is in some sense signaled. Raymond's mother is identified with the Queen of Diamonds, but it is Josie Jordan, played by Leslie Parrish, who appears costumed as the Queen of Diamonds at an important turning point in the film. Might Josie actually be the Queen of Hearts? After all, even Méliès got his queens confused in the U.S. catalog description for the living playing cards, mistakenly identifying what is visibly the Queen of Hearts in the film as the Queen of Spades in the catalog. In any case, if Mrs. Iceland is the Queen of Diamonds, then Senator Iceland must be king to her queen, though not necessarily of the same suit. It follows that Raymond is a jack, and with his military service, he might well be the Jack of Spades, since spades were derived from the archaic suit of swords. Marco's long military service, and the role he plays as the film unfolds, would seem to make him the king of spades. Yen Lo strikes me as a joker. While there are moments in the film that feel like a metaphorical game of 52 pickup, or playing a game of cards with a deck that is missing a few, one thing we do know from the rules of Klondike Solitaire is that every card has a place in the final layout, even though not every deal will necessarily result in completing the pattern, no matter how many times the player cycles through the cards. Sometimes a card that is needed remains concealed beneath a card that is face up on the layout. The rules also specify that moving cards around on the board must be done in such a way that red and black number cards are made to alternate in descending order on each file. Similarly, the colors of face cards must alternate between black and red kings, queens, and jacks in descending order. Several 3-shots in the film suggest an alternating pattern of king, queen, jack. Notice this 3-shot of Raymond, his mother, and his stepfather. Or this 3-shot that displays a similar pattern of male-female alternation and metaphorical red-black alternation. Something similar, with more literal face card simulacra, can be seen in these shots of Yen Lo. This shot in the party sequence appears to contain a more literal joker in the middle ground. The experience of playing Klondike Solitaire certainly resonates with aspects of the film's story, although one must also acknowledge that viewers of the film have even less control than a solitaire player. We can pause the film or rewind it to see exactly how the cards were played, so to speak, but we have no ability from where we are watching to move any of the cards themselves. We cannot affect the outcome in any way. Having played many hours of solitaire myself, mostly with actual cards, rather than on a computer or other electronic device, I can confirm that the solitaire player has more control because the player can move cards around in the layout and pull down cards from the foundations to extend the files, so long as the red-black alternation is maintained. In my experience, it offers a relatively pleasant way to pass the time, as we hear several different characters in the film say, without either the emotional or intellectual involvement of, say, reading books, something which Marco does a lot, or watching movies for that matter. Theatrical spectators during the film's initial release and subsequent re-releases, before it became available quite literally on demand at the touch of a few buttons, had less autonomy, of course. They had only the ability to leave the theater or not, and to attend a screening or not in the first place. Unlike most games of solitaire, theatrical screenings are collective experiences, perhaps analogous to watching a solitaire game more than playing one. More recent digital modalities for viewing, reviewing, and endlessly segmenting the film in varying increments all by oneself, like those I have exercised for hours in preparing this audiovisual essay, perhaps offer the only truly interactive analogy with solitaire, one that necessarily involves the hands and the fingertips as much or more as dealing, arranging, and rearranging a deck of 52 cards.
So I says to him, my advice to you, from the bottom of the heart, don't play poker. If I was you, I'd get myself another line of action.
You may put the cards away now.
Why don't you try it for a while?